guy, and I won a couple of awards for designing games. I work in the analog game side of it, board games, role-playing games, tabletop stuff. How many people here actually play tabletop board games? Raise your hands. All right. How many of you here intend to work on the digital side of game development? Okay. How many of you here intend to work on the analog side of game development? I've done it once. I see 3 people very far back. Okay. So, that is kind of what I was expecting. So I'm going to start first from why this talk will benefit you if you aren't doing the analog game side, the game side of things. The very first thing that everybody who designs a game needs to understand is where the fun comes in from your game. And yeah, this is really basic, but having talked to about 4 people here before this presentation started, it seems to be one of those things everybody assumes they know what it is, except that they never actually talk about it. Fun for your game comes from the emotional engagement, and if it comes from emotional engagement from your players, that engagement must meet your players' expectations, and anything that is not meeting that emotional engagement needs to be cut out of your game. Who here has heard of a game called No Man's Sky? Yeah. What was the cause of No Man's Sky's failure? Anybody know?
It's complicated.
It was an English game made for stupid Americans.
Marketing error.
It was overhyped.
Actually, the failure mode of No Man's Sky is that while it had an emotional engagement, that emotional engagement did not match any of the expectations they set for their players. And there's a lesson to be learned from that, because that is a very common failure mode in just about every game development cycle that I've ever seen. The very first thing you should do when you're thinking about your game, before you actually think about your game as a game, before you think about the things you want to put in that box, visualize who your audience is. Who is your customer? What do they want? What will cause them to emotionally engage with your game? Because if they don't emotionally engage with the game, the worst thing that's going to happen is you're going to get the grinding. Everybody here has played an MMO. Everybody here has gone through the grind through the encounters to get the stuff, to go sell it back in town, to get more gear, to get through the next level of grinding. And oftentimes they will try to cover this with somebody handing you a quest, somebody handing you a task to be done. They'll even try to hook it into the narrative, and if they're Bethesda, they're good at it. And if there's everybody else, they stink at it. But the thing that you need to do to make your game engaging is to focus on who your customer is, who your audience is, and what will they want for emotional engagement. So the first thing you should do is look at what customers are already playing and look at what the emotional engagement is. In the tabletop field, emotional engagement is actually pretty easy because you have an awful lot of games that require more than one player to play. Oftentimes you have games that need 2 or 3 or 4 or more players to play. That makes it really easy to spot what the emotional engagement is for those players, because part of it is socialization. They want to know that they're getting to trash talk with their friends, that they get to talk about this, that, and the other, depending on how casual the game is, but they feel like they're getting a reward out of it. If you over-focus on rewards, you get Skinner treadmills, and you get things like Pokemon Go, which is an amazingly brilliant Skinner treadmill, but it's also hit a situation where its player base has dropped by, 30% in the last 2 weeks. That's an example of a very good initial emotional engagement. You gotta catch them all. That's an emotional hook. That is an engaging hook. What they fell through on, or haven't managed to do, or ran away or their success ran away beyond anything that they'd anticipated, which is a problem, admittedly, but it's a good problem to have. Where they ran into a problem was how do they continue that emotional engagement? Thinking about your customers first, thinking about what they're going to engage with, starts off, it gets you down the road to focusing on your game design. Anything that does not aid that emotional engagement should be chopped out of your game design. That doesn't mean it shouldn't be in there at the beginning, because at the very beginning of game design, you're basically making stone soup. You have this list of ideas, you're going to be writing them on the whiteboard, you're going to be talking to your collaborators, you're going to be talking to your team, everybody's going to be throwing things to the wall, you're going to see what sticks, and you're going to try putting this all together, and you're going to try putting this into an environment where you can put it in front of players. The sooner you can get players actually interacting with your materials, the sooner you'll find out what they're actually hooked on, what they're actually emotionally engaging with, and the sooner you'll find out what's extraneous or what needs to be reworked to actually get what you're looking for. The next part of emotional engagement is that human beings respond to narratives. Everybody who's watched the news has seen the standard news story narrative: who, what, where, when, why, and how. This is also something you need to think about when you're putting your game together. Who's playing it? Who's the character? Who's the player identifying with? What are they going to be doing? What is the challenge they're meeting? Where is it happening? Why are the players going to be caring about it? How are they going to solve through, and how are they going to solve the problems that are presented? Now, as somebody who designs games and somebody who's very much on the crunch end of the continuum, the crunch to fluff continuum is what it's called in the tabletop industry. Are those terms used in digital gaming?
Occasionally. Depends on. It depends more on where you're working in digital games. The mobile space, I see it used more often.
Okay. As somebody who very much falls on the crunch side of things, I'm the equivalent of a programmer for designing board games. I make algorithms that people read off of paper, go to wetware. I have to spend a lot more time on the narrative and on the focus side of it. For me, I always like to jump ahead to how, and that's really something you have to stop and work your way back from if you have that particular focus in how you want to design games. Ask yourself, first and foremost, who your player is going to identify with. What are they going to be doing? Why are they going to care? What does your game do that the other games in this space do not do? Now, that can be something as cool as I managed to combine Pokemon, which is a worldwide mimetic phenomenon that dates back for 20 years, with walking around with your cell phone, and which everybody has, and okay, I'm doing an augmented reality game. And the difference between Pokemon Go and Ingress is pretty much a reskin of Ingress, and giving you a few more targets for things that you're going to be doing. This is one way to successfully launch a game. Look at what other people are playing. Look at what people are actively engaged in. In particular, if you are designing games and you are not playing games, you have a very good chance of making your own designs kind of stale, because you'll just refresh and work on the things that you're comfortable with. If you never actually push yourself outside your comfort zone a little bit, you won't actually get to see other things that might cause emotional engagement. The other thing you should do is you should talk to people who are playing games. Ask them what they're doing. Ask them why they're having fun. Ask them how they're having fun. Not everybody's going to be able to do a good, solid analysis for it, but if you get enough people talking, you'll eventually get a feeling for what people are playing, what people are engaged by, what are hooking people. So, you answered a question for me before. What project are you currently working on?
Me?
You?
Crash Bandicoot remakes for PS4.
Could not hear you.
Crash Bandicoot remakes for PS4.
Okay. So, what's the emotional engagement hook?
Right. So I guess players are really drawn in by the nostalgia factor, and Crash is a cool character. The environment, especially the enemies and the bosses that you go up against, and I guess some of the enemies and levels are pretty engaging anyway. A big theme with the series is very rich, detailed environments and characters that are fun and kind of crazy.
Okay. What projects are you working on? Yes, you.
Working on a VR application that uses microphones to control the environment, basically.
Okay. So that's a pretty cool hook for how the player interacts with the environment. Where's the emotional hook?
We're basically trying to set it up so that players have to like really use their voice and get like involved with, you know, if they start like singing along with like the game and the game reacts to that, or if they, you know, learn to just yell like a whole bunch, you know, it's just like a more, there's a word like immersive, I guess, like experience for the player.
Now, who's your character? Who's your player going to identify with? What is that character's narrative?
We're kind of like almost at the point of developing that. Right now, it's like since it's virtual reality, we're just cheating where we're just saying, oh, it's you as the players in this environment. But we're trying to make like some narrative of why you're in that space and why you have like these weird, you know, sound-based powers and stuff.
All right. Think a little bit about the narrative, and I will come back to you in about 15, and I'll come back to the later part of this, but just have some things to spitball with the green hair. What projects are you working on?
Me or other green hair?
You're closer, put the glasses on for it.
Oh yeah, I'm wearing glasses on. I'm not working on it anymore, but over the summer I worked on a real-time strategy game, space game.
Okay.
And the pull for the player was the fact that you were supposed to be saving these refugees because someone's attacking the galaxy, and so you had the emotional motivation to save these people because they A, upped your score, but B, they were written to be similar to real people, and you had interactions through these leaders who would be like, hey, like, these are people, you should feel bad if you let them die. And so that was sort of the emotional reason for why you progressed through the game as you did.
Excellent. Now, since you actually looked like you were working on something that was in development, what aspects should have been cut because they weren't enhancing the emotion?
We did actually cut some of the more grindy stuff. There was a planet resource collection that still does occur, but it works more as a timing mechanism now than a collection mechanism, which it was before. When people were playing it before, they didn't like it because you had to go and click on the planet to get resources, but now just a ship flies over and collects automatically. So it works more as a way to, I guess, limit the player on being able to move and force them to use more strategy in the scene than charging forward. So we got rid of the resource collection, which was the real grindy part of it. What else did they cut? There was a political system that was too complicated at first, but got simplified to be more relevant to what you were doing.
How did the political system interact with the emotional engagement of rescuing your refugees?
Whichever refugees you rescued were from different packs, which is what the political system was based on. So if you let ships die from one pack or you didn't protect them accurately, then you would have your relationship drop with that pact, and you would then become enemies, and then they would attack you. So, or if you helped them, they would be like, hey, we're going to join you. So there was the connection of both strategy of trying to get everyone to like you, but just also the emotional of people.
And I know that some of your strategy was balancing who you're going to be helping to win and how.
Yes.
Well, I'm assuming there was also a strategy where if you helped one pact a little bit too much, other packs would get jealous.
Yeah, the way we balanced it out is there's like a, usually the way you can help or hurt packs, no matter what you do, you're going to always hurt and help someone at the same time. So it's sort of this kind of pattern that you have to do to kind of balance it out. It is possible to have everyone like you. It's very difficult, and it's one of the less stable state patterns to be in for your political system. The most stable is having what is the most stable? The most stable was having everyone hate each other but like you. That was the best state to be in, strategy-wise.
Another lucky ability.
Yeah.
But that also illustrates the next thing I'm going to work on. There is a term of art in digital game design, and to some extent it's led on over to tabletop game design. This term of art that I really and that is the term of art called the core loop. Games are not loops. If your game is nothing but a loop, you don't have a game, you have a grinding mechanism. Your game is an ecology, it's an ecosystem of decision making. Every decision that you make in a game should be influencing other decisions down the road, either by you or by other players, or in the case of digital games, decisions that are made or algorithms that are set by the computer program. And the reason why I bring this up is because I have talked to so many game developers who immediately fall into the core loop because, well, if you actually want to have a career in digital game development, you kind of have to explain what the core loop is, because there are going to be people who are about 4 levels above you in the org chart who don't want to go into the nitty-gritty details. They just want to know what the core loop is, because when they're asking for the core loop, they're really asking for what is the emotional engagement, where is the fun that's in the box, how do we sell this to the customers, and who are the customers that we're trying to reach. This is also one of the things that kind of, runs into one of the problems. Going back to the example of No Man's Sky. No Man's Sky made a mistake when Hello Games talked about how it was going to be multiplayer eventually, because they had originally thought that they could actually make these procedurally generated worlds mesh and communicate. I'm not sure how, way beyond my technical expertise, but I know that when you make a game, I know that an exploration game versus a multiple player interaction game is very, very different, and it has to be very different very early on in your design process. So when you're thinking about your player, think about your players, plural. Who are your players? What kind of players are they? One of the received wisdoms about designing role-playing games is that there are really about 4 or 5 different kinds of people who play role-playing games. There are the people who want to be the dramatic artists. They're the people who like to speak in nice, loud, projecting voices and to play their characters and act. I happen to be one of them. There are people who are tacticians. They really want to get a feel for having beaten the challenge of the game. And to some extent, tacticians really want to have either a close fight, or they want to come in and they want to know pretty much that they have crushed the enemy, seen some driven before them, and heard the lamentations of the game master who can't make the fights any tougher without killing the rest of the party. There are people out there who are social gamers. They come to these games, and yeah, part of the fun is pushing the miniature around on the map. Some of the fun is hanging out with their buddies, talking to their friends, etc., and so on, and BSing around. And then there are also people who want to come in and just basically unleash all of their frustrations from having worked in a dead-end cubicle job for 6 days in a row with mandatory overtime. They just want to they just want to start that chainsaw going, and they want to start slaughtering their way through whatever happens to be in front of them. And what do you mean you got to talk to NPCs? That's getting in the way of doing the things that I want to do. The thing that Wizards of the Coast discovered when they were putting together all of the Who Was Our Player research is that you can't actually make a viable D&D campaign that excludes one of those 5 player types. You can't make a D&D game that will last long enough to be a memorable D&D game if you exclude the actors. And D&D is one of those games where the actor types tend to get kind of short shrift by the rule support. You definitely can't get a good D&D game going in the long term without catering to killers or the kill junkies. And you really can't get a D&D game going at all unless you have a couple of social gamers in there, because the social gamers tend to be the ones who are the glue that knits everybody together and make them show up. Which is why it's important to recognize that your gamers are also members of the ecosystem. They're going to be making decisions within the game, and they're going to be making decisions about the game and what they're going to be playing, that you have to be cognizant of when you're setting up your game design parameters. This is also one of the places where you have to think about the technical aspects of your game. Now, for me, doing board games, technical aspects are relatively minor, they've come out with new kinds of dice, but I don't have to worry about Sony's PlayStation 5 being completely compatible with everything that I've worked on for the last 7 years. I don't have to worry about whether or not a player has a dual SLI, and I have no idea even what the current high-end video cards are because I'm 5 years behind to be able to play the game. But you do need to think about what your technical constraints are, because that is also going to constrain who can play your game and who is going to actually engage with it. And once again, everything does come back to emotional engagement. Think about who you're emotionally engaging, what they're going to be aspiring to, what they're going to be thinking about, and what they're going to be wanting to do. Everybody here has played Tetris, right? Okay. What do you think the emotional engagement is in Tetris? So Tetris, like a lot of puzzle games, the emotional engagement actually comes from the fact that the pace of the music keeps picking up as it goes on. And that music actually comes into your ears and you're not even conscious of it, but it is raising your stress levels as you're playing through. And it is making it more and more challenging, more and more terrifying as you're going through. Now, I know this because somebody actually went through and put very primitive VR goggles on somebody and had them playing Tetris in an fMRI machine, doing a brain scan. And it actually showed that what Tetris makes you feel is fear. More than anything else, Tetris is about being terrified of failing, knowing that it's going to happen inevitably. Now, if you can make Tetris that terrifying, think about reskinning Tetris as a zombie game. How would you make Tetris, if you wanted to make something that was basically a reskin of Tetris, I would go with a zombie theme. I would go with the classic defend the mall from the zombies coming in at midnight, making up your challenges, and make sure that your musical cues keep on picking up the pace as the zombies come a little bit faster, as they come a little bit more engaging. Some games work best because of atmospheric. Because of atmospherics. Five Nights at Freddy's is a beautiful example of a little teeny tiny indie atmospheric game. Atmospheric is also really important for the tabletop side of things. It is almost impossible to sell a game that has no theme whatsoever. It's almost impossible to make a game that has really clever mechanics and absolutely no theme. Even classic games like chess and F-Type have a theme, which is basically medieval combat. The only game I can think of that doesn't have a theme that is still played and has been played for years is Go. At least until Google's AI manages to destroy us all. But this again gets back to emotional engagement. Think about who your customer is. What are they going to be engaging in? What are they going to be reacting to? What emotions do you want them to see? Because these are the constraints that are going to focus your game design. When you're focusing your game design, there's going to be a point where it looks like a funnel. You're going to have all these ideas up at the top here, all of them. They're going to connect, and you're going to be making connections back and forth as you go through on this. And then as you go through, this is where you start putting it in front of players. And you're going to have several cycles of putting it in front of players. Your first set of players are going to be the people who are working on the project with you. They're going to be people who've seen this pile up over here. And this is good because it allows you to figure out what wants to chop out. Eventually, and sooner rather than later, you need to actually put your game in front of players who know nothing about it. The sooner you do this, the better off you're going to be. Because they are going to tell you by passive aggression, by not showing up for later playtests, by going, I've got to wax the cat, rather than showing up for the next playtest. The sooner you talk to players, the sooner you have players who are not part of the development cycle with it, the sooner you're going to get honest feedback about what is actually working and what is collectively engaging, what's getting collective engagement. If you have the capability to set your game down in front, to basically put your game down in front of a group of players, and have nobody in that group who's played the game before and watch them through one-way glass, do it. This is one of the most useful things you will ever discover about your game, and it is amazingly humbling. It is particularly humbling if you do this to a bunch of teenagers. You will not walk out of there with an attacked ego. You will, however, have a videotape of unfiltered, completely honest complaints about what didn't work, and what sucked, and what frustrated people. And that is the most useful feedback you can get when you're developing a game. Imagine what No Man's Sky would have been like if they'd actually done it. Because No Man's Sky is entirely about player frustration, and No Man's Sky is a beautiful example of somebody coming up with a game, and it's really cool, and he only talked about it with the people in his closest coterie and cadre of coders, and once it got on out to people who hadn't been there through all of the development cycle, what was No Man's Sky? No Man's Sky was a resource gathering grinder with pretty graphics and procedurally generated universe where you were the only thing in the universe that was capable of moving. And that is an example of what happens when you don't play test. Anytime somebody makes a complaint about your game, set your ego aside. Just completely put your feelings aside. What you want to do is you want to write down that complaint, and remember that that person is just up in a new shape, because they have just pinpointed something that needs fixing. They've told you how to make your game better. And that is a really important process, and it's something that doesn't happen often enough with the crazy development cycles in digital games. I have no idea how to solve that problem in digital games, but it is a problem that it is the thing that keeps me out of doing large-scale digital games. And it's one of the reasons why a lot of digital games seem so very formulaic. How many times have you guys seen me go into the warehouse, beat the bad guys, take the stuff, and get out? Everybody seen this at least twice? Okay, the reason why that's there is because it's a playtest. They know it works. Now, sticking with what you know works is a great thing. It really simplifies your development cycle, and you do need to do that for some of the things that you're going to be doing. But when you're looking for that emotional engagement, you really need to have players who have never played your game before play it in a controlled environment where you're watching what they're doing and watching what they're interacting with, and where you are getting their unfiltered feedback on what sucks. And you need to tell them at the beginning, and this is why teenagers are great, because you don't need to tell teenagers this, but you need to tell 20-somethings, don't be afraid to tell me this sucks. Don't sugarcoat your opinions. Teenagers, they don't sugarcoat. They have so many options they have so many options for things to consume their time that an option that isn't working for them, they'll tell you right then and there, this doesn't work, this sucks. Understand also and have a good idea of, you have a question?
No, sorry.
No problem. Try and understand what your gamers, what your customers specifically want out of your game. There are a lot of people who think that all gamers are interchangeable. Now, this also basically says that somebody who likes, this also says somebody who likes the Zynga games, casual game players, It's exactly the same audience for the person who likes to play the Conquer the World Empire games. And it's exactly the same audience as the person who likes to play Pokemon Go. It's exactly the same audience for No Man's Sky. I can tell you right here that those audiences not only are not the same, they don't even have much of an overlap. This is where you're drawing, Venn diagrams where one circle is on this side of the whiteboard, one circle is on this side of the whiteboard. They're not even on the same sheet of paper. Figure out who your audience is and focus on that audience. Start with what emotionally engages them. Don't try to make your game all things for all people. The sooner thing is, if you try to do that, you end up with a game that doesn't work for everybody. What project are you working on?
I am not working on any project at the moment.
Already? Do you have a project?
They're free.
Yes? No me. I didn't catch who said that comment, so.
Oh, no, I said, I was making a joke, you're free.
Ah! So this kind of stuff is architecture. It's laying the foundation for your game. And it's something you should be doing before you think about the technical challenges. For the sound-based arena combat game, some of the constraints you'll want to think about are how annoying is this game going to be to the people who are sitting in the room listening to people hum or shout or do key eye blasts? Is this a game you can play at the bus stop while you are waiting for your bus to arrive? How is ambient noise going to impact it? What are the decisions your players are going to be making? How do those decisions interact with other players? So how are those decisions going to be constrained by real-world constraints? For example, in a lot of games, in a lot of paper games, the amount of tokens you have in the game is an actual honest to God constraint. And so you have to actually think about how many bits and pieces and how much furniture you're putting in the game, and then design around those constraints. If you're designing a card game, for example, cards are printed in multiples of 18 cards. If you're designing a game that has cards, you need to make sure that your game has a multiple of 18 cards in it. Otherwise, you're going to end up paying enormously for cards that are basically going to be run on a press sheet and then thrown out. Think about how fortune is going to impact your game. Fortune is basically how the random elements apply. There are some games where fortune happens in the beginning. You roll the die, and you roll the die, and you look up something on the table and it tells you what happens. There are some games where you make a decision, you roll the die, and the die roll determines what happens. And there are some games where you make a decision, you determine what happens, you roll the die, and you see what the consequences of that decision are. So that's fortune at the beginning, fortune in the middle, and fortune at the end. And those all have different aspects on emotional engagement, at least in role-playing games. There are some people who absolutely cannot abide the idea that they roll the die and then describe what happens. It just bothers them. It just bothers them. Thank you. The other thing that happens with that, where fortune comes in as one of your constraints on your game design, is fortune at the end means that players have the illusion of much more control over what they're going to be doing. Think about with player engagement, how much control you're giving the players and how much you are taking away from them, and how much you are letting them basically be protagonists and controlling the outcomes of the game. So the way I structure these talks is that I ramble on and on for about 40 minutes or so, and we're down to about 45 minutes, and I'd like to open up the floor here for people to throw questions. So, any questions? Yes, sir.
Can you describe better how to approach the dichotic ideas of this person will give you direct feedback that you need to listen to and your game isn't for everybody?
I didn't hear what your second example was.
Your game is not for everyone. There are different gamers.
So, in tabletop gaming, one of the things that happens is we usually have dealt with enough people who play tabletop games to have some idea of what kind of gamers are out there. Somebody who likes painting lots of figures for Warhammer 40K, and really likes playing a tactical game with a little bit of social aspect. Somebody who likes playing a game like Fiasco, which basically starts with the end scene and you work everything backwards from that to make a Coen Brothers movie interactively, doesn't want to paint miniatures at all, and really doesn't want to think about the tactics of the situation whatsoever. So for that, it's really a matter of figuring out what games are similar to yours, identifying the people who play those kinds of games, and figuring out what it is that they want. Any other, next question? Yes, sir.
So in the at Oscar games, is that like, is the Burnside view? Or no?
Yeah, the Burnside is new. Yes, Doctor.
So I made a card game where the rules is you don't know the rules.
Okay, sounds like
How
Fox.
do you find the target audience for those kind of people?
Okay, so,
Or generally speaking, like what is the process of finding the target audience? And actually finding real play testers that falls into that category.
okay, so, first of all, the rule where you, the rule is, the rules of the card game where you don't know the rules, that sounds a little bit like Flux by Looney Labs. That kind of game is actually an exploration game, as you think it through, as you put it together. And that is a game where your players that you're looking for are the ones who are comfortable with not knowing what comes next and hey, let's try and find out. For finding players for that kind of game, the place that you would go would be you would go to game stores, and you would go to game stores on their board gaming nights. If you want to get more formalized playtesting of that, there's a convention that happens in Morris Plains, New Jersey in November called Metapia. And I'm going to be going down to that with a couple of games of my own development. And it's put on by Albany Wing and by Vince Salzalo and Double Exposure Productions. They also run the playtesting halls at Gen Con Origins. And that is a great place to go and take your analog games and put them in front of actual players and get results. Next question. Yes?
What kind of constraints did you have to deal with when developing some of your analog games?
Constraints that I had to deal with. One, everything that I print has to fit in the box. There is a classic science fiction role-playing game called Traveler that has a whole bunch of deck plans for ships. And the deck plans are laid out in 5-foot squares, just like Dungeons and Dragons is. And anybody who knows anything about ship design or spaceships or anything like that looks at the designs of the ships and goes, those don't make any kind of sense from an in-universe perspective. The reality is, all of those ships were designed so that the ships would print on an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, which would fit in the box or fit in the book. So that's one of the constraints. Now, within that constraint, I have die counter sheets. And each of those dies cost me about $300. And each of those dies has a certain number of slots that I can use. And so it behooves me to make a supplement for a game that uses one of the 3 dies that I've already got. So that means that, for example, my main die has 2 Dreadnought class ships on it, 5 cruisers and 5 destroyers. So every supplement I'm going to be doing is going to have a 2, 5, and 5 for most of the ship mix, that's in there. The other constraint on there is that I also have my own on-demand facilities for ad-astra games. So it's much easier for me to make something that goes on a booklet that's printed out like one of these. Except that when you do a booklet like this, you're constrained. The booklet has to be multiple 4 pages. I cannot do a 33-page booklet. I'll end up doing a 36-page booklet with 3 blank pages. So what tends to happen is that I write to fill a certain page count on my side. Next question? Yes.
I don't mean to be rude, but we actually have to get these folks back up for a meeting at RPI by 8, and we have to kind of jog up the hill, so I think we got to get everyone to boogie.
Okay. Then let's call it a wrap.
Thank you.